So I'm going to start off with some things, kind of speaking specifically to the students. Um, and as we all know, the teachers out there, I mean, you guys can feel free to take notes on that to share with your student leadership if you find something that's helpful. And then after that, I'm going to go into some stuff more like rehearsal preparation, sort of the nuts and bolts of how I've done things here. And that might be a little more intended for the teachers, for the percussion directors out there. But for the students, that's a really good way to look under the hood and start to understand some of the how and the why of teaching. And I don't know about you, but when I was your age, I always kind of had an ear for trying to figure out why the teacher was doing what they were doing. What was the strategy? What was the game plan? Almost like if you watch a really good coach when they're coaching, trying to analyze exactly like how they're doing what they're doing. So hopefully I'll be able to share something that provides a little bit for everyone here. And if we have some time at the end, if you have any questions, feel free to raise a hand or something. But to start off, I want to talk about student leadership in a way, presenting some four basic things that I find make a difference in any setting. And to back up even more, I don't think they have anything specifically to do with percussion or music. I'm going to talk about them in terms of those things because that's why we're all here. I mean, you could hopefully apply these things to any management type of environment, any type of leadership. But four basic things, I think it's easy to be overwhelmed, especially as a student leader. I became my first taste of leadership. I think I was maybe a junior in high school, and I was one of our section leaders. And I had no idea what I was doing. And and then going on into college as well, I had an opportunity to be the section leader for the University of Connecticut Drumline. And when you're a student leader, I find in all my experiences, all the years I've done this, that's the hardest leadership position I think you'll ever be in because you're not quite a student and you're not quite part of the staff. Yes, you are a student, but you're not really part of the gang anymore. You have to be the person who has to lead things. You have to set an example. You have to be willing to say no to certain things. But also you're a leader, but you're not really on the staff. You're not one of the band directors. So it's this really weird sort of middle management uh, position. So I think it's easy to get overwhelmed. I certainly was. So what I want to offer is four things. I think if going into this week or whenever it is you start band camp or start your fall music program for marching stuff or concert stuff too, four things that I've found when working with our student leaders here at MSU that's really helped them. And when I've been able to be able to observe really solid student leadership, it's because I see this and what they're doing. And for those of you who have been active with university band percussion, if it's anything like our program here, we rely quite heavily on student leadership. Of course, I'm there to write the music, to give some direction to it. But the day in, day out, all the nuts and bolts, I get entirely too much credit. I mean, all of that goes to the student leadership that I have here. So four things that I've observed in them, and if I ever mentor them, these are things that I like to talk about. So four things: being the example, maintaining communication, creating ownership and pride through organization, and preparation. So to dive into those a bit more, the first thing, the best thing you can do, even if you have no idea how to teach, how to be a section leader, be the example. Be the thing that you want everybody else to be. First thing you can do, be the first to arrive and the last to leave. So like being the Marines, the first in and the last out. Just that by itself sets the example for everybody else. Um, all of the other younger students coming in for the first time have no idea what Drumline is or what the program's about. They see you doing that, they're going to think, okay, that's how we do things here. Also, if something needs to be taken care of, an equipment thing needs to be fixed, the band director, percussion director wants to run something past you, you have plenty of time. And being the last to leave, that way you can get a lot of things done before the next day. So the work doesn't compound. And I just think as a leader, being visible is one of the best things you can do. Second thing, do it yourself before asking others to do it. A challenge I put out there whenever I do a leadership talk or a clinic, and say, for example, we're talking about going into band camp or going into drum camp, I challenge all the student leaders, and it might be too late for it for this year if you're coming into band camp or drum camp this coming week, but I would challenge you, have all of your music memorized before the first day of camp. And who knows, that might be a thing that your percussion director asks you to do already. If so, that's great. If not, because usually there's a little bit of time, okay, we're learning it during camp, we're putting it on the field, it's getting memorized, or doing some pass offs. And that might be something the rest of the section has to do. But imagine just the presence you'll have, the statement you'll make. If you walk in first day without saying a word about it, don't make a big deal about it. Don't announce it. For God's sakes, don't make a post on social media about it. Just show up without saying a word, have all your stuff learned. And even if they don't say so, people are going to notice that. And there will be one, two, hopefully more younger students in that section. They look at that and they go, huh, okay, I want to be like that person. Okay. The third thing, and this isn't something I came up with, I think I found this online, but it's something that's really stuck with me. Be the person that you needed in your life, right? Because being a student leader, you have some experience. You're not walking in on your first day of band. So you have some experience there. But you can remember back to when it was your first day of camp, and your parents are dropping you off, and maybe you don't know a lot of people, you don't know anybody maybe, and you don't know what this is, you're not even sure if you want to be there. And think about that. Like, what's one thing if somebody could have walked up to you during the beginning of camp or during a break or something and said one thing to you that put you at ease, that made you feel like you're part of the group? So you could just relax and maybe let go of some of those anxieties and just, enjoy being part of the group and really get to work on what you're doing musically. Think of that, because the new students in your section are going to probably by and large have the same anxieties, the same apprehensions, the same nerves that you had. And I tell this to my students during our first day of drumline camp. Um, you know, Most of the time we walk into the band hall on the first day of drum camp, and it's like separated, one side of the room and the other, like the Jets and the Sharks. We have the older students and we have the newer students. And the older students probably have their pads out and they're ramming through something from last year's show. And then we have the new students on the other side of the room watching that going, oh man, like, what am I doing here? You know? And, in college, for a lot of them, it's maybe their first time away from home. So there's a lot of anxiety there. So I always encourage the older students to reach out. And I tell the younger students, the ones that are new, every single one of those older students that looks like that they've got it down. They're friends with everybody. They've got all the chops in the world. I remember when they were in the new people's shoes. So I think what you want to do, and we'll talk a little more about building culture later, but that's something that's really powerful. So be the person that you needed in your life. Okay, second thing, communication. Ask your directors in section for feedback and admit what you don't know. This is one that I speak of from experience. I felt when I was a leader and I was younger, even, into my first years of teaching professionally, that I felt like I didn't want to look like I did not know what I was doing. But in many ways, I did not know what I was doing. I knew enough to get hired, but I don't know as much as I know now. And now I don't know as much as I will hopefully 5 or 10 years from now. And the best way to get that learning curve going for yourself, and also most importantly, serve the people that you're leading, is ask for feedback. So maybe talk to your percussion director and say, hey, you watch me lead that subsectional. Is there anything you saw that maybe I could do better? Or, hey, I got the drums cleaned and tuned. Is there anything else you think I could do that maybe I forgot? Or if you're leading a sectional, at the end of the sectional, there's nothing wrong with asking the students themselves, hey, how did that go? Is there anything we could have done differently, or anything I could have done, or anything differently that you wanted to work on? Because they'll tell you, even if they're not the most experienced and sophisticated musicians, they'll be able to articulate if they felt like they got something done. And when I was younger, I felt that that would have been admitting some kind of weakness, or they would have thought less of me. And now, in my experience teaching college, not just the drumline, but our percussion ensemble and whatnot, I try to, as much as I can, I'll try to ask the students, hey, how did that go? Is there a different way maybe we could have done that? Do you feel like we got everything done? And I'll use that direct feedback to come up with a plan, right? And also choose your words carefully. I think we live in an age where we can say anything we want, both online and maybe in person and whatnot. And there's a lot of clout that unfortunately gets, associated with that. You want your younger students to be your legacy. As much as we're all honed in on making 2025, 2026 the best year ever, what's even better than that is 10 years from now, 20 years from now, in my case, now 30 years outside of high school, coming back and seeing people still playing drums there, doing something that you had to be a part of in order for that to keep going. And the way you do that, yes, you want to create the best musical experiences possible, but you want to treat people well. Because in this day and age, people have more choices of what to do with their time than ever. And they're in band because they choose to be in band. They're doing percussion because they choose to be in percussion. And you say, well, maybe in some their parents are making them do that. Okay, fine, but their parents are choosing for them to do that. The parents could choose something else. So I would much rather play the long game and keep people engaged, and do it in a way where everybody feels like they're being respected. And that's a much bigger topic. And if we had more time, we could probably do an entire session just on that. Um, but yeah. So the third thing now, create ownership and pride through organization. I think a lot of times we focus on drumming, and that's great. We focus on playing and playing clean and playing well, and that's awesome. But in percussion, there's a lot of other stuff on the bottom part of the pyramid that has to take place beforehand and also concurrently as we're working on the music. So ensuring that equipment is well maintained and stored, right? As percussionists, we probably have the biggest overhead as far as gear goes. Um, and a good way to do that is to delegate smaller tasks to the individual students. Something I would recommend is having a chart and have the students each week, they go through and they check off as they go through their equipment. Make sure they have all the lugs. A big thing in our drum line here, the bottom lugs on our snare drum is always fall out. Where I don't know where they go. Um, our big thing for us is our stands and our carriers. We burn through all the little screws on those and all the little small parts. So having the student go through with their instrument and check off, okay, all the lugs are there. The batter head and the bottom head are in good shape. Snares are in good shape. Their sticks or their mallets are in good shape. So that way, if there's a problem on the horizon, it gives the band director more time to get out in front of ordering a replacement. If the sticks are starting to wear out, you could say, hey, the competition or first performance is in a couple weeks. Could we put an order in now? And I know your band director, your percussion director will definitely appreciate that more than getting on the bus, going to the competition. You go, hey, so and so's sticks broke, and that's all we have. Or we broke our last set of tenor heads. Instead, having them go through, I think it saves your time, so you're not having to spend extra time making it one more thing for you, but it also creates a sense of ownership for the students, because even though they don't own that set of tenors or that bass drum or that vibraphone, during marching band, it is theirs and they have to take care of it. And there is a right way to store it and a wrong way to store it. There's a right way to maintain it, and a wrong way to maintain it. So you're building that culture. It's not just about the playing, it's how we take care of our gear. It's everything that comes with the identity of being a part of the drum line or the front ensemble, and in much larger respects, the band at your school. And then since you have that in place, maintaining frequent communication with the percussion director or the band director. And I know that being a percussion director myself, that's something I love when my student leadership, they'll have a chart or they'll have a notebook or something, and they'll come to me and they'll be like, hey, Dr. Baker, just to let you know, we're running a little thin on tenor heads. I think we're going to be good for maybe like a couple of weeks, but we want to get something in the pipeline now, and that way we can keep on going. That way, when it gets to playing music, to doing the fun stuff, we don't have as many things getting in the way of that. Cool. So the last thing in this, number 4, is preparation. Prepare ahead of time. A saying I tell a lot of people is, if you don't have a plan, you don't have a prayer. You don't have to worry about having a perfect plan, because there is no perfect plan. You don't even really have to worry about having a good plan, because if you're new at this, you're probably not going to have a good plan. But if you have a plan, you can create a feedback loop so you can improve and you can self assess, and you'll certainly be much better off than just kind of going into it blind. And this probably applies a little bit more maybe if you're at a smaller school where you don't have a percussion teacher that's there every single day. And I'll talk to a lot of students where they might have a person come in during camp, to run the percussion stuff for camp, but the day-to-day stuff during the school year, during the fall, that's all them. So you have a high school student kind of serving as a surrogate percussion director. So this applies a little more there. So finding out what the day's goals are, maintaining communication with the band director. When you have, if you're a student leader and your job is to take the drum line or the front ensemble off somewhere while the rest of the band works on music, find out ahead of time what the day's goals are going to be for the band. Are they going to work on um, the first 25 measures of the opener because they're getting ready to put it on the field that afternoon? Then make sure your goals align with those goals. That goes hand in hand with managing your time efficiently, making a schedule. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we get into actually the rehearsal strategy things I'm going to talk about a little bit later. And then try to brainstorm multiple ways to accomplish each goal, because you might have a plan, but then when you get in and you start trying to work through it with the other players, with the younger students, it may or may not work. You know, I have an uncle who's a math professor, and he told me one time, he's like, you know, I don't teach math, I teach people. And so when you understand that, yeah, maybe there's only one kind of math you're teaching that day, or you're teaching one piece of music that day, but you're teaching it to a bunch of different people, and they're all different. And they may be different from day to day, just based upon what's going on in their lives, based upon if they're younger, if they're older, you know, where they are maturity wise. So brainstorming multiple ways to accomplish each goal. And you know, that's hard to do if you're brand new at this. So that's a great conversation to have with your band director or your percussion director, somebody with experience, somebody who went to school and took classes and education and pedagogy. And I think that's a great way to really tap some of the experience that your teachers have and use that not only to help you become a better musician, because they're there to do that, but also you can really get a lot of information from them on how to teach. And that's something that you can take into your lives. If you're going to be a teacher yourself someday, that's awesome. If not, you know, you'll be in charge of somebody at some point if it's in a job or some kind of management type situation. So, next I want to talk about some of the nuts and bolts of how we run percussion rehearsals here at MSU. And I sort of caution that with, you know, if you're a band director or percussion teacher and you're on this call right now, you have a lot of experience already, I'm sure. And you have your own situation, your own teaching environment, and with variables that are going to be different, you know, in many cases than what I deal with here. But by talking about this, my hope would be that maybe one or two of these things sparks some new ideas, or maybe a different way to approach some of your individual variables that you have in your job. So I'm going to talk about three things: preparation, execution, and adaptation. Right? The preparation, if you don't have a plan, then you don't have a prayer. So what we do beforehand, the execution, what we're actually doing at the rehearsal, and then the adaptation, which is creating that feedback loop and trying to get a little bit better with it each day. So it's going to be a fluid concept. And this is something that I try to do in my own teaching. As we get into drum camp and band camp here, I try to come up with a plan, and then as we move through the week and we get a better idea of what that specific drum line or that specific ensemble you know is capable of and how they function best based on the people that we have, I go into that adaptation phase. So let me see here. So for me, the preparation end of things, I want to make sure that as I prepare for camp, that my student expectations have been communicated well in advance, but preferably before the summer begins. So we have our auditions in May or sometimes late April. We've been doing them since COVID. We've been doing them by video submission. We find that especially if you know, in our case, we have people from out of state applying and auditioning. We found that to be um, pretty helpful. Um, then once we decide who's going to be in the section, we have all of our band camp and drum camp information emailed to the students. And part of the audition expectations when they go to audition is that they'll be able to attend on these dates, and here's what the time frame is going to be. And then right off the bat, I try to have the exercise packet and the cadences already in place. So once the drumline membership has been decided, I send them the camp information, and then I send them the exercises and the cadences. So that way they have something to sort of hit the ground running with. It's no longer this abstract thing. They can actually say, okay, I've got some music. I can get my sticks out and my pad out. I have something I can start working on each day. That creates a little bit of positive momentum. And the way we do things is I tell them that they're going to have to pass off all their music from memory by the end of the drumline camp week. So even though there's no memorization requirement going into camp, I try to make it informed where the more it is memorized going into camp, the better experience it's going to be by the end of camp. The second thing is making sure all the equipment is in good working order, just like I talked about a few minutes ago with the student leadership. This is something I rely very heavily on with my section leaders here. I delegate that to them since we do our auditions, as I said before, like late April, early May. Then we kind of figure out how many snare drums we're marching, how many cymbals we're marching, how many bass drums. So that informs, how many of each instrument we need to have in good working order and available as backup. So usually for them, I say, okay, by the time you leave town after finals week, I'd like that. That way I can go through it and I can get the ordering information to our band office, because every drumline and their brother is going to be ordering stuff. And it's very easy for things to get put on back order. And then we wind up in August with not everything we need. So we try to really hit the nail on the head pretty quickly. So working that pipeline of delegating it to the section leaders, that way it gets done really quickly. I'm not having to go through everything. And then I try to get the music sent out to them, the show music, usually by the end of June. Cliff Taylor and I have been writing music together for last 21 years, 21 years, something like that. He writes all the wind parts. He's like a genius. He can transcribe and get all this stuff really fast. So it's almost like a contest that we have. Like he finishes up the winds and sends me one. I write the drums and he'll get me the next wind chart pretty fast. So that way, by the time we get to camp, they have everything they need for camp. Then during camp, say the first week of August, where we just have percussion, we learn all of the music. We typically memorize all of the cadences and all the exercises, all the show music, because at least here, the way we do it, we usually have 3 shows. One's a little bit harder, and the 2 others are kind of pop shows. We have it so they can play through all of that. They don't really start working on memorizing it until we put it on the field, because that's going to happen at different times in the semester based on what show we're doing. But they're able to play through all of it. And that way, when the winds come in and the color guard comes in the week after that, they can do their job better because we've done our job. So we're kind of building it from the foundation up. I like to think if you pick the right people and give them the best resources and then manage their time as effectively and professionally as possible, if we have a problem like in October, it's not really an October problem. That's probably like a May problem or a June problem that we didn't really see coming. Again, we've been doing this together for enough years where, I like to think we've figured out a pretty good system. But as I said, you're not teaching music, you're teaching people, and you do get interesting things that come up from year to year. And then I take that, and if there is something weird that comes up on any given year, I make that part of the feedback loop. Um, so yeah, so the next part is setting a daily schedule. And I'll go through and figure out, say, if we have 4 days of drumline camp, I'll pretty much figure out for every minute of that camp what we're going to be doing, what part of music, what tempo, how it's going to lead into what we're doing the next day. So, generally in marching band and drum corps, I think we've always worked in like 3 hour blocks. I'm not really sure why that is, but it's just, what I've always kind of grown up with, and it's a lot of what we do here at MSU as well. So typically, if I have a 3 hour block, what I'll do is I'll organize it into 4 sub categories. I'll start with a warm up or working on some technique. I'll do that for 20 minutes with a 5 minute break. And typically, if it's a technique or a warm up that's going to tie into the music we're about to play, that's even better. So, warm up slash technique for 20 minutes, followed by a 5 minute break. Then I start with new music next, whatever the new material is going to be, while their minds are fresh, especially if we're outside and we do our drumline camp outside, just so that way there's no huge shock of doing drumline camp inside in the nice air conditioning and in the nice resonant band hall, and then we go outside with the band and it's hot, and all of a sudden the drum line sounds not as good as it did inside. I'd rather just rip off the Band-Aid on the first day. So I start up with the warm-up and technique. I go into new music, do that for about 50 minutes, followed by a 10-minute break. Right. And then after about 50 minutes, that's usually like people have a hard time retaining anything new after that. Then after that break, I'll go and review previous music, maybe the stuff we did the previous day or the previous block. Do that for 50 minutes again with a 10-minute break. And then the last thing I do is work on memorization. So I try to tie the new stuff in to the old stuff. And so I'll usually do that for 30 minutes and then maybe like a 5 minute little wrap up, to get them ready for whatever's next. So I think with that in mind, all I have to do is figure out how much music I need to do in each one of those blocks. I'm obviously not going to do all of it. A good way to start, I found, is I'll just take however many measures are in whatever piece we're doing and divide it by the amount of days that we have. So if say a chart is 100 measures long and we need to learn it over the course of 4 days, we can work on 25 measures per day. And now that's not an exact science. We're going to have to shift that maybe because there are going to be parts that aren't as hard. They're going to be more repetitive. Certainly with some of the pop style shows we do, there are an awful lot of patterns in there. And then there might be a section or two that is pretty dense, that is pretty challenging. So there's going to be a little bit of shifting in that. But again, as I said, you don't need to have a perfect plan going in. You just need to have a plan. And then you look at that plan at the end of each day and you go, okay, well, that worked. Or, hey, we had way too much time for this. We got through it really quickly and we got bored and we could use that time better. But this over here, we didn't have enough time for. So that's where sort of the art of this comes into play. And that's going to change each year based on the music, based on the students, based on an awful lot of different variables. So I think as long as you have a plan and you can put it on paper, I'm a big paper person. I like to make, lists and charts and plan everything out. I find if I can put it on paper, I can kind of track it, and if something works, great, I can keep it. And if it doesn't work, I can go, okay, let me balance that out. Let me try it a little bit different the next day. And then the next day, even if it's not perfect, it gets you a step closer. And if you keep that up, not just through band camp or drum camp, but throughout the fall semester, I think you're really going to be maximizing your time. Because I know in college band, and certainly I'm sure in high school band, you don't really have all that much time. At the beginning of the year, it looks like a lot of time, like, oh man, this is going to be a long semester. But when it gets down to the nuts and bolts of it, the time goes by, given the amount of work that you have to do, it goes by pretty quickly. So the next part is execution. You made your plan and you show up and you get to work. How do you put it into action? Um, well, one thing I find is that I try to use, as I mentioned before, dividing up the amount of measures in the piece by how many days I have, and that's a good starting point. I do something else with tempo. Um, I try to use the most difficult passage in the piece, find what tempo the students can play that comfortably. Not to say it's going to be clean or perfect, but comfortably enough where it sounds like, you know, generally what it's supposed to sound like. Find the tempo for that and then make that the tempo for the entire piece. In fact, I have different tempos for camp than I have tempos for the rest of the semester. Like for our cadences that are generally, I don't know, a cadence tempo is usually like 115 to 120 beats per minute. I won't let for band camp, or I'm sorry, for our drumline camp, a lot of times I won't let the tempo go above 90, just because I want them to get the muscle memory and the ear training of how it sounds consistently. Instead of playing the easier stuff at a faster tempo, then we got to stop and slow it down for the harder section, or we keep the tempo up and the harder section just kind of sounds bad. What you're doing there, you're actually making your job harder because you're instilling muscle memory and ear training, which is not exactly what you want it to be. So I would rather have everything be slow and boring, and my students hate this. It will not be without resistance. But, it's like making your kids eat their vegetables. It's in the end, I think it pays off well because you don't have as much time as you think, and it's much easier to go if everything's slow and boring and tedious. They can play it all well, no breaks, no problems. You start letting your foot off the brake a little bit, 5 beats per minute by 5 beats per minute. Not only do they know it really deeply, but the muscle memory is really, really solid. Um, as far as teaching strategies, I mean, we could go into a whole discussion about pedagogy. But one thing I like to do is I like to talk as little as possible. I like to keep the students playing as much as possible. I think in our case, it's because we don't have an awful lot of time. I think when you're dealing with younger students, anything with them playing is better than them not playing, because it's probably going to be more practice and certainly more structured practice than what they've done at home. And that's a concept I got from my teacher at University of North Texas, Mark Ford. I mean, he told me, like, if you're teaching, and I got this from like pedagogy of teaching private lessons, only talk when you absolutely have to, because as soon as you stop playing, you start talking, the timer starts going, and their attention span is only going to take up so much, and then you risk losing them. So I would rather put up with some stuff. Maybe things aren't going perfectly and I could stop and explain it. But if I keep them playing, I might demonstrate it. I'll stop, I'll have everybody watch me play, or I'll play on a person's drum as they're playing. And I don't risk stopping, losing the momentum, and then having their attention spans go all over the place. So, another thing I like to do is go one measure at a time. I remember when I was in drum corps, I aged out with a group called the Glassmen, which some of you old timers like me might remember. It's a drum corps out of Toledo, Ohio. Our instructor, a guy by the name of Lee Bettis, we would go through and go one beat at a time. I don't know if we ever did this for like an entire chart, but whatever section of music we were working on, he'd say, okay, let's start with beat one. And we play beat one a bunch of times. Okay, we're going to add beat two, beats one and two. Do that a bunch of times. And what that does, one, for the staff, you're able to really catch any mistakes that are there. It gives you a really good vantage point to really watch and check, make sure everybody's doing what they need to be doing. But also the depth at which the students learn it is really, really nice. They're able to really and again instill that muscle memory and instill that ear training and the mental awareness of what the part is. Um, some basic things I like to do as far as breaking down parts. I don't think any of this is unique to me, and a lot of you, I'm sure, do the same things. When teaching the snare drums and tenor drums, when dealing with rhythm, I'll have them take out drags, have them take out flams, take out roles, and have them just understand the rhythm of what's going on. If a part proves to be too hard, if it's overwritten for the group, that's a great way to adapt it. Again, that's nothing new. And when working with patterns that have accents, obviously taking out the accents, having them play everything at one height so they really get that ear training of what the rhythm is supposed to sound like before adding the accents. On tenor drums, my tenor line always hates this, but I terrorize them with playing it on one drum first. Again, did not come up with that, but I have sort of the unpopular opinion that I don't look at the tenor drums as a separate instrument by itself. I think it's five or six drums, and you play on them with the same integrity with which you would play on one drum. So get the sticking, get the quality of sound, get the interpretation right on one drum. That's not to say there's not going to be additional challenges moving it to the five or six drums, but your foundation will be much more solid if you start off on just one drum. Um, Bass drums, a thing that's really helped us, in addition to just playing check patterns, like if you have split 16th note, sextuplet, or 30-second parts, just playing the eighth note outline. Again, that's nothing new. A thing that I picked up on, and I didn't invent this, I don't know where I got it from, but if you have a split part, right, and the students are having trouble each laying in their individual parts, have them take the composite rhythm and play it in unison. So, for example, if the part is dum 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 dum, you know, 1, 2, 3, E and four, and it goes down the drums. Have them play boom 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 boom, all as unisons. And then most of the time, it works like magic, even with parts that are more advanced. Have them play the overall rhythm, and they are able to hear the context in which they're playing. Again, going back to the ear training. That's something that we talk a lot about in classical percussion or in music theory, but we can address it the same way in percussion, certainly in marching percussion. Have them understand the overall rhythm by playing it. And for us, I don't really have to do a lot of explaining. It's a great go-to. As I said, I don't like to talk a lot during rehearsal. So I'll just stop. I'll say, hey, basses, take that rhythm in bar 4 and let's all play it as a unison. And we'll do that a couple of times. Then we'll put it back into context with the split part. And usually without me saying anything or calling out any individual players, it's there. So that's one. Again, I didn't invent that, but I certainly want to pass that on. If you haven't tried that, it's certainly worth trying. Cymbals. I know not all of us have cymbal sections, but at MSU we do. I don't know how how many of those things we have this year, like 14, 15. We've had as many as like 17. Um, so a couple things, if you're marching cymbals and you want to help them understand their parts, I have them put the cymbals down, have them clap their parts, just understand the integrity of the rhythm. Also, if they have different sounds going on, crashes and sizzles and chokes and slides, all of those different things. And this is kind of similar to what I talked about with the bass drums. Have them play the rhythm, but just with the hi-hat sound like that. So instead of doing the crash and then all the different musical choreography that goes into the different sounds, only fight one battle at a time. If you can get it going with the hi-hat only, that's another one that I'll just have them do that and then put it back into context. And usually without me having to do much more, the students are able to fix their own problems that way, and it really saves an awful lot of time, just like that thing I talked about with the bass drums. And then lastly in this, we want to talk about assessment. How do we not only give the students goals to work towards, but also how do we assess if what we're doing is working and how we can improve it. So I'm a big fan of having pass offs. It gives the students a goal. I sort of tell them like, hey, band's a class, drumline's a class, just like your physics class or your English class, and your test is when we're gonna have a pass off at the end of the day on Thursday, and it's gonna be on this part here. And I try to make it small enough things. I don't say, okay, we're going to pass off all of everything on this day. It might be, hey, the first half of this chart, so that way they can go home after camp, they'll go back to their dorm room or their apartment. And it's something that's manageable, something that's attainable, even if a student comes in without a lot of experience, it's something they can do. And if we're managing our time correctly, you pass off smaller amounts of things, but over multiple days. And I think you're able to get a lot more traction out of the students uh, that way. Something I go to sometimes during the year, I'll have them do video pass offs or video assignments. Like say, for example, we're getting ready for a game week here, and there might be one or two students that like they're not it's not completely there yet. Like they can play through most of it, but there's a couple spots where they're falling out or there's a problem. Instead of taking time out of rehearsal or having them come in outside of rehearsal again, because everybody here is doing a lot of different things, I'll say, hey, could you make me a video of that part right there? And it might just be like 4 measures or 8 measures or something. I'll say, hey, send me a YouTube link by the end of the day on Thursday with you playing that. That way I know that coming into Friday, our last rehearsal before the game, they'll be even better with it. And then for Saturday, they'll be even more confident. And I try not to be punitive with it. I try to say, hey, I think this is something that's really going to help you gain the confidence. So that way, when we get out in front of whatever, 70,000 people, you're going to feel even better about it because you spent a little bit more time. And the beauty of doing video assignments is that most of the time, and I think the teachers out there will probably agree with me, most of the time they're not going to send you their first take. They're going to video it and they're going to look back and watch it. They're going to go, oh man, I messed that. I could have done that better. So what they start doing is self-assessing. They start self-teaching. And that's beautiful because now they're their own teacher. They have investment, with it. Not to say they always do that, but more often than not, the student is not going to send in their first take. So they're practicing more. Not only are they practicing, but they're watching a feedback loop of what they're doing and trying to make it better. And I think you're able to, instill that ownership with them. And it's also just a much more time efficient way to handle things. And then finally, the last thing I want to talk about is adaptation. Um, Asking for feedback from the staff and the students. I talked about this before with the student leadership stuff. Um, I'll try to do this as much as I can. I wish I could do it more, given our schedule here, but I usually have the best rehearsals when I ask for feedback from the students themselves. Was the pacing too fast? Did we go through stuff too fast? Or did we go too slow? Did we feel like it got boring and we lost the momentum? Or did it have the correct focus? Did I come in thinking we really needed to work on this one thing, but everybody in the section's going, man, the stuff that we're missing is really this, you know. And so I'd rather go with that, because the more confident they feel out there and they feel like their time is being used correctly, even though as the teacher I am in charge of it, if they can feel like their time is being used well, I think you get an awful lot more out of them, and the culture certainly, is able to stay positive. And then also finding out, which methods worked best. Did full-on ensemble work best? Did subsectionals work best? Or did sending the students off for individual time work best? And this is where, depending upon the personalities in that group or just their learning styles, it's going to vary. Our drumline every year here is slightly different in that generally I find we learn the best in full ensemble rehearsals here. Usually if it's something they need to go off and work on in subsectionals, um, we've had years where, yeah, that can work too, but generally, for whatever reason, I don't know, whichever way the wind's blowing that year, at least in the past couple of years, the full on ensemble thing, I feel like we can accomplish more that way. But that's, something for you to try out, and certainly something that I'm going to be trying out this year as we get into it, because you're going to have different personalities, new people, you're going to have old people, but the old people, they're a year more experienced, or a year different. We for the older folks on this call, I mean, we can all think of like the person you were from when you were 15 to when you were 16 might have been entirely different. The amount of change that goes on in a person from year to year, especially working with young people. So I think that the best advice I have is just to have some different approaches and try them out. And you'll see pretty quickly, with your particular group, which one works best. Or just given what the situation is, one might work well in this setting, or it might work better in a different setting. So anyways, I promised I would keep this under an hour, and I think I did. So I'm coming up on 57 minutes. So I hope y'all enjoyed this. Um, if anybody has any questions, because I don't want to keep y'all too long here, my email was on the flyer for this. So you can reach out to me that way. I will also send you the outline that I have for this webinar as a follow-up, and I'll probably throw some MSU music on there as well, just as kind of a fun thing to send out. It's all for the taking, so feel free to play through it yourself, or if you want to share it with your students or your friends or something, that's fine. But anyways, I'd like to thank you all for being here. And if you have any questions, if there's anything I can do for you, be sure to reach out. And if I don't hear from you, I wish you all the very best for the fall season, for what's left of your summer. And certainly for the school year, both musically, academically, and otherwise. I certainly hope y'all have a great experience and a great year. All right, so that's all. Stay cool, stay safe, and I hope to hear from y'all soon, okay? That is all.